Thank you, Chair. I then move, seconded by the member for Perth Wellington, that the prima facie contempt concerning the People's Republic of China's cyber attack against members of Parliament be referred to the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs.
Mr. Jennings, seconded by Mr. Nader, moves that the prima facie contempt concerning the People's Republic of China's cyber attack against members of Parliament be referred to the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs.
So we know that foreign interference is a grave threat to our national security in the context of this Cold War we are living in. That foreign interference is a primary weapon in this new Cold War. And we've seen time and again how Liberals have been reluctant to take this issue seriously, and a big part of it has been the reality that Liberals have benefited politically from foreign interference. But I think what we're now seeing is an awakening in our country around this issue. And it's not a new issue for some, but it's a new issue for others. I know when I was first elected, in some of the first conversations I had with members of different multicultural communities from various parts of the world, at the top of their list was concerns about foreign interference. Because when members of our Canadian family have family members that are overseas, when they travel overseas for various reasons, they can feel these threats to their family, to themselves, to other aspects of their life, much more acutely than people who don't have the same kind of connections in other places. So we were warned, and I know if I was hearing those things, that members of other parties were hearing those concerns as well. We were warned from diaspora communities about the grave ongoing threat of foreign interference. And yet this government has failed to act on it after 9 years. So this is the context that brings us to this important question of privilege. Now the material facts are on the record. I will review them and comment on some further aspects of this particular case, because this is what brings us to this question of privilege that the Speaker has ruled on, and that I hope now will go to the Procedure and House Affairs Committee for further study. So, Madam Speaker, I was targeted, along with 17 other Canadian parliamentarians in 2021. I was targeted because of my involvement in an organization called the Inter-Parliamentary Alliance on China. The Inter-Parliamentary Alliance on China is a global network of legislators. It includes people from the left, from the right, from other places that are not on the spectrum, and from everywhere in between. It includes legislators in most, if not all, of the world's continents, and we work collaboratively in the context of this new global Cold War to protect democratic values and to protect the things that, despite our political and geographic differences, that we share in common. A commitment to freedom, democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. And it has been a great honor of my career to be a co-chair with IPAC. And it is in a way an honor to the work being done by IPAC that it has been marked out as a target by the PRC. I can share a particular anecdote. I remember the first meeting that I participated in IPAC. We received a presentation with demographic data relating to what was happening in East Turkestan. East Turkestan, a place where we have now recognized people face genocide, but it was at a time when that recognition had not yet taken place. And when I saw the data, it was clear to me that this had all the hallmarks of genocide. So coming out of information that I received from IPAC, I was able to work with colleagues to facilitate hearings that took place at the Subcommittee on International Human Rights, which led to the determination by that subcommittee that Uyghurs were subject to genocide. Subsequently, in response to a motion from the member for Wellington Halton Hills, this Parliament unanimously, without the Cabinet, but parliamentarians who voted unanimously, recognized that Uyghurs were subject to a genocide and continue to be subject to genocide. Subsequent to that, again driven by these relationships among legislators that exist around the world through IPAC, different other countries, other legislators, took up this call that had been started by this Parliament, also recognizing that Uyghurs have been subject to genocide. And I believe that Uyghur genocide recognition played a crucial role in the international movement towards seeing the real threats associated with the PRC. And you can see this in the response from the regime in Beijing. The regime in Beijing targeted IPAC legislators, and it targeted those involved, especially the member for Wellington-Halton Hills, in pushing forward for the recognition of the Uyghur genocide. Because while Uyghurs face horrific systematic violence that is genocide, this reality exposes, it truly exposes the evil of the CCP regime. And now that we have seen this, as Wilberforce said, we may choose to look away, but we may never again say we did not know. But exposing that reality to the world, exposing the horror of CCP crimes, was something that the Interparliamentary Alliance on China played a crucial role in. And so you would expect, and this is what happened, the CCP, having no respect for national sovereignty at all, sought to interfere in other countries, to intimidate and threaten legislators who played a role in that process, and to try to steer countries away from taking clear, principled stands in favor of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. And so in the very early days of IPAC, a cyber attack was launched against members of the network, which included 18 Canadian parliamentarians. That attack, in most cases, targeted parliamentary accounts. In my case, and I believe in the case of a number of other members, certainly in my case, my personal email was attacked. And the government of Canada knew about this. They knew that members of Parliament were being targeted. They knew because they were told by the FBI. The government has admitted that they knew. At first they said nothing. Then they admitted that they knew, but they said, well, we told House of Commons administration. And so why didn't they pass on the information? Look, Madam Speaker, I think that anybody who knew should have told me. This is information. If I'm being targeted by a foreign state, and there are, especially when there are tools I could take to protect myself to a greater extent, I definitely should have been told that, and the other 17 members of our Parliament should have been told that. But the responsibility primarily falls on the government. The government had a responsibility to inform us, and it didn't. Last year, as the Speaker's ruling mentioned, there was a ministerial directive about more information being shared with parliamentarians. And yet the government still continued to sit on this information about parliamentarians that were targeted. It would have been logical, at least once that ministerial directive was issued, for them to then choose to share information that went back a number of years but still had relevance to me as a continuing member of Parliament and a continuing co-chair for IPAC. But they chose not to share that information. So imagine the surprise that I experienced, member for Scarborough-Guildwood and others, when we found out, not from our own government, not from Canadian security agencies that we had been targeted, but we found out through the IPAC Secretariat, which had been informed by the FBI. That's clearly not how the process should work, Madam Speaker. This is a grave problem that the government did not have our backs. And I can only see again in this that the government has looked at these issues of foreign interference through a narrowly partisan lens, not wanting to share information with either members of the opposition or members of the government backbench who may from time to time challenge the government precisely on these issues. The government didn't want to share information that might lead to more political questions. The government wanted to keep that information secret, and I think also they wanted to downplay concerns about foreign interference, because those questions about foreign interference inevitably come back to uncomfortable questions about the government, about things the government has done, about things the government has tolerated, about relationships the government has allowed to persist, and relationships that the government has used in pursuit of their own political advantage. So I think what we need to do is step back from this narrowly partisan lens that the government has brought to this issue and talk about the critical global fight we're in and talk about the national interest. The national interest would be that we all work together to fight against foreign interference, that we take attempts to subvert our democracy very seriously, and that we work together to combat them regardless of who that target is. That if the member for Wellington Halton Hills is targeted by foreign interference, or if a member of the government is targeted by foreign interference, or a member of another party, that we would nonetheless all stand together and use all of the tools available to protect our country, so that whatever the outcome of Canadian elections, it is Canadian people who are deciding. You know, foreign governments, foreign ambassadors should not be stakeholders in Canadian domestic elections. Canadian domestic elections should be decided by Canadians.
Hear, hear.
And yet we know that this is a problem. We know that there is abiding concern in many cultural communities that the perspectives of ambassadors, of consul generals, of foreign governments have an effect on the outcome of elections here in Canada. And I think we need to work together to firmly slam the door on that. What concerns me most, this is a question of privilege about members of Parliament. And as the term suggests, we do have privileges as members of Parliament.
True.
And this is where I want to conclude. That when my email is attacked, we have an opportunity, as we should, for a debate in this House. And part of that is because I have privileges as a member of Parliament. But I think about other cases. I think about the case of Chimi Lamo, a Tibetan activist who was a student leader who faced a barrage of horrific threats after she was elected to student government because she was a Tibetan leader who had spoken out about justice for Tibet. I think about other leaders. I think about a student group at McMaster, Muslims for Justice and Peace, that faced foreign interference threats because they wanted to have an event highlighting the violence the Uyghurs were facing. I think about the many people whose names we will never know, our fellow Canadians who are not able to speak out, whose voices are not heard, whose pain is not understood because of foreign interference threats that prevent them from speaking about political issues, from participating in the political process, because they worry about what will happen to their family members. I am far more concerned about the impact on members of diaspora communities. I think about Mr. Najjar and his family. I think about people from a variety of different communities who have faced violence, have faced threats as a result of intimidation and violence and foreign interference. So we need in this debate to stand up for the privileges of Parliament, for the integrity of our democratic system, and for the rights of every citizen in this country, regardless of where they were born, regardless of where their family lives. It has been 9 years, and I have been hearing concerns for the entire time I've been a member of Parliament, but escalating concerns. Indeed, this problem has been escalating. It has been getting worse. We've seen brazen foreign interference in this country from foreign actors who increasingly know that we know and don't care because don't think we'll actually take it seriously. But I hope that we will finally take this seriously. I hope that we'll be able to come together, and if not, that we'll have a new government that will take these threats seriously. Because in the context of this new global Cold War, the national interest, the building of a strong multicultural democracy requires us to ensure that democratic decisions in Canada are made by Canadians, that legislators and also everyday citizens are free from foreign interference. So, Madam Speaker, I thank the Speaker for his ruling. I look forward to this debate, the issues it will raise, and the work that will be done at Proc. Thank you very much.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. And I think it is important for us to note that we do have some incredible civil servants that perform amazing work in protecting our interests. And I'm thinking of the Communication Security Establishment, in which, from what I understand, shared the information with the House of Commons officials shortly after receiving the information back in June 2022. So I think it's important that we don't try to give the impression that no one knew about this, that the issue was in fact being addressed, at least in good part, with true good intentions. My question is that the member was on the committee, and it's the Interparliamentary Alliance on China. I don't know how often the committee meets or anything of this nature, but did the committee not ever discuss the issue that the member raised as a privilege? Maybe you can just give us some background in terms of the feedback he's had from other committee members, because I believe it's a certain number of countries. I'm not too sure about the association. Maybe you can tell a little bit more about the association and what discussions they've had on this issue.
Honourable Member for Sherwood Park for Saskatchewan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. There's two parts to what the member said. In terms of the government's assertion that they informed House of Commons officials, what I can say is that there were 18 members of Parliament who were targeted by a foreign hacking attempt, that the Government of Canada knew about it, and that at no point until the last few weeks did the members of Parliament who were targeted find out about it. And the government's defense is to say, well, we told some other people, right? Well, that's great, but you didn't tell the people who were affected. We had a right to know that we were being targeted by a foreign state, and it is not the responsibility of the House of Commons IT department to be informing us about these security threats. It's the responsibility, I believe, of the government. But what I can say for certain is that the government did not inform us, did not insist that we were informed, provided no assurance that we got the information. And that is fundamentally unacceptable. If I become aware of something that is very significant to the life of the member for Winnipeg North, and I don't tell him about it, but I go tell the member for Northumberland Peterborough South about it, and then later it comes out that I didn't provide this vital information, and I say, well, okay, I didn't tell the person affected, but I told somebody else about it. I think we would all understand that that was ridiculous. What was crucial here is that the 18 members of Parliament who were targeted by a foreign state did not receive information that the government had about threats to us. And we could have used that information to protect ourselves and to challenge our system on further steps that needed to be taken to protect from...
Questions and comments, questions et commentaires, l'honorable.
The Honourable Member for Joliette. Thank you, Madam Speaker. This will just be a comment. I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for Sherwood Park for Saskatchewan for the question of privilege. I commend the decision of the Speaker, and I commend the motion that is currently under debate. Like the Honourable Member has mentioned, there are 18 elected representatives, including himself, that were targeted by foreign powers because they are members of this House. And so we have foreign powers who are interfering through dubious maneuvers, which is unacceptable. I understand that the members were not immediately informed when the government and official authorities got the information. We have to make sure that we have a mechanism in place through government or through the Whip's office so that in the future this crucial information can be sent to relevant members of Parliament. I would like to remind my colleague that CSIS keeps reminding us Canada and provinces are laggards when it comes to fighting against foreign interference, and so this has to change. So, for this motion, we will support the motion. We want the issue to be debated as rapidly as possible as an element of priority at the Proc Committee. And to finish, Madam Speaker, I would like to remind everyone that democracy is fragile. We have to protect it, we have to take care of it, and we have to allow it to flourish. Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Honourable Member for Sherwood Park for Saskatchewan.
Speaker, I thank my colleague for his intervention, and I will pick up with where he ended, which was recognizing the fragility of democracy and freedom. Many of us have lived in this country for our whole lives, and I have as well. And we've never known anything other than the kinds of freedoms we have in this country. But I'm struck when I travel to other places. It struck me especially when I visited Ukraine in 2016, the 25th anniversary. And of course, it's more acute now, the sense of the fragility of freedom. But even then, many people, everyone over a certain age, remembered a time when they didn't have their freedom. And we have to always keep in focus that the liberty, the sovereignty we have as a country is not automatic, is not inevitable. And the biggest threat to our sovereignty and security is not the possibility of direct invasion. The biggest threat is what I described at the beginning of my speech, what Sun Tzu describes as the attempt to swallow us whole. The loss of meaningful freedom through escalating foreign interference. This is the greatest threat to our freedom, to our sovereignty. And we have seen in other countries how the gradual process of foreign interference has eroded the ability of free peoples to make decisions about their own future. So the member is right. Our freedoms are fragile, and they are under direct threat by foreign interference. We see those threats as members of Parliament. But we also hear about and know about those threats targeting everyday citizens and targeting other institutions. We are already seeing certain institutions that modify their behavior in response to the preferences of foreign stakeholders. And this is a demonstration of a loss of sovereignty. So I hope that we all hear this clarion call, especially coming from diaspora communities, to stand up for Canada, to stand up for our institutions, to stand up for our freedom, and stop this foreign interference.
Okay. Questions and comments? The honourable member for Crowfoot, Battle River Crowfoot.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I appreciate both the motion and the interventions that my colleague made in initially bringing up this question of privilege and in the speech that he just made. So I think there's the impacts that this has on the lawmaking and legislative authority. But what signal does it send? That there has been a lack of response, that there was not appropriate awareness brought to parliamentarians. What message does that send to diaspora communities, especially when it comes to the actions of the PRC, the communist dictatorship in Beijing, and how that affects on some incredibly sensitive issues that certainly transcend political parties in this place. This is not simply a conservative issue. This is something that has affected members from multiple political parties, and how that affects diaspora communities and their ability to be free and active players in Canadian democracy. I'm wondering if my colleague from Fort Saskatchewan, Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan, could expand on that impact.
The honourable member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. What message does it send? These events suggest, yet again, that when people are victims of foreign interference, the government does not have their back. And sadly, this is something that I have heard time and time again from talking to Canadians who are impacted by foreign interference outside of this place. We had a vote today on listing the IRGC as a terrorist organization. I can recall a press conference we hosted on Parliament Hill with a young man whose wife was murdered when Flight PS752 was shot down. He faced threats from the IRGC when he started to speak out about these events. And I've spoken to many others who've been affected by foreign interference, and they've been frustrated by trying to report what they've experienced and by being passed back and forth between different agencies, by being given the runaround, by not being given the information they need. And this is a case where people who have the privilege of being members of Parliament were not told about threats to themselves. I think members of Parliament should be informed about threats. I also think we should be, whenever possible, and unless there's some compelling security reason not to, we should be seeking to inform anybody about foreign interference threats to them or institutions they're involved in so that they can take appropriate steps to protect themselves. And we need to have their backs, whether it's a member of Parliament or a student leader or an everyday citizen who's afraid of going to a protest. We need to have the backs of our citizens who are worried about foreign interference so that they know that they can speak and advocate based on their own convictions regardless of what a foreign state thinks about it.